It's me, Willie, the Tapwise Owl. Down under, we've got a cheeky little game called Two Facts and a Fib. Reckon you can spot the porky? Number 1. Before hitting record, Andrew swore blind that this was a ripper idea and that my true blue Aussie accent would be a smash hit with all you crafty beer professionals on the YouTubes. Number 2. Tapwise makes it dead easy to run your beer club and bring your mates back to the bar with your very own branded brewery app. Monthly subs are a breeze, perks and rewards tick along on autopilot, and the cash lands in your bank account every night, you business legend. Number 3. In the past year, breweries have pulled in nearly 100,000 extra chatroom visits and raked in over $1 million in recurring revenue with apps of their own. Got the fib? Right, mate. Andrew reckoned this was a bugger idea, but joke's on him. I went and did it anyway. So book a demo today and let's show Andrew you're keen on packed tap rooms, steady revenue, and of course me, Willie, the Tapwise Owl. Cheers, Cobber. Now enough chin wag. Let's get on to the learny bit.
Right on. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining. My name's Anthony Shibata. I'm a partner here at Whipfly and really looking forward to kicking off today's session. We have a great lineup of a number of very talented and experienced individuals to help walk you through some of the biggest questions and concerns that we see with the individuals and companies in the brewing segment. So today, to introduce everyone for our panel, we are going to be highlighting Lawson's Finest Liquids, and we have two individuals from Lawson's Finest, so Fiona Gray and Alyssa Sorrentino joining us from Lawson's. Thanks to you both for being here. I will help with introductions here with our slide. And we're also joined by two other individuals, Randy Smith, CEO of Vicinity Software, and also Dane Kopke, who's a partner at Whipfly who leads our Microsoft Dynamics BC practice. So as we go through today, what we're going to be doing is a little bit of history from Lawson's during the course of their transition from startup brewery through where they are today and the systems and changes that happened in place. And so we have Randy and Dane here coming in to highlight some of those efforts on the system side as we get the story from Lawson's. All right. So to start, maybe the beginning is the best. So I guess for our panel, Fiona, Alyssa, if we can, do you want to share a little bit about kind of journey, what's gotten you here from Lawson's from the beginning, and how it started and where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I can start and have Fiona chime in. So Lawson's Finest has been around since 2008. We started as a backyard brewery in Warren, Vermont. Our founders, Sean and Karen, were just brewing beer in a shed in their backyard on a one-barrel system. And we've grown quite a bit over the years, selling at farmers markets and then starting a partnership to contract brew with Two Roads in Connecticut. And I've been with Lawson's Finest since 2017, which was right on the cusp of when we built our destination brewery and tap room in Waitsfield, Vermont, which is really one of our big milestones of when we were really investing in people and equipment and changing the business as kind of how it looks today. And Fiona joined us in 2021, which was another sort of big shift in how we operated when we switched from QuickBooks and some other like spreadsheet type systems into Business Central. So we've been kind of steadily growing since then.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add to that. I'm Fiona. I'm the accounting manager. I joined Lawson's in 2021, like Alyssa said, fresh off of COVID. It was great to get back into person and to a really poppin' tap room out here in Vermont. And as a company, we just grew in 21. We outgrew the QuickBooks in a system and really moved on to kind of feeling like we're putting on our big business pants on right there and getting into an actual accounting ERP and growing in that end. And yeah.
So as y'all grew, what were some of the key milestones that you were seeing? So what are, when you're talking about expanding distribution, when you're adding team members like Fiona we were just talking about, when you're scaling production, what were some of the outside factors that really just started to put pressure on what you were doing when you're a little bit smaller or a little bit earlier on? Like, what were some of those kind of key things that kind of highlighted that, okay, now we're starting to need that next level?
We were, I mean, looking back, very fortunate to be kind of in the position when we were small to be, more demand than we could sort of maintain, especially when, at the beginning it was pretty much all done by one person. So we never had the capacity that we should have to start out, right? And so I would say inherently, knowing that we needed to streamline and invest in some of these systems was always part of our plan because it just couldn't be done with one person. But the big milestones certainly were, deciding to build this destination brewery and taproom in Vermont, knowing that we were needing more people, so many other systems that come with that, expanding into different states and really diversifying our food portfolio.
Yeah. Like Alyssa said, we started as that backyard brewing with like 7-barrel system. And in 2018, we upgraded into that 45 barrelage, kind of big old tap room where we were, multiplying production a lot. And then we hired an actual full shift. Like Alyssa said, we started with one guy, our founder, Sean Lawson, in his backyard. And then we actually hired a full shift of brewers and sellers and packaging team, and started hiring out, getting all of that other production people inside to help us out. And then in 2021, I joined, obviously, and we kind of just jumped up again. And those were the kind of like big steps that we had taken. In 2018, when we created our own system, we jumped onto Vicinity. And then when I joined and we, expanded the leadership team and wanted more financial reporting, we jumped onto BC so we could have more reporting and all of that.
Yeah, it's big changes, right? So jumping on the systems, I mean, that's much easier said than done. And that's, I think we can maybe transition a little bit into that, because when we start talking about, expanding the tap room, investing into your people, getting more visibility into what the business is doing. And then obviously the system transitions as a part of that, right? Not just the result of it. There's some big challenges there. And so, I mean, how do you even approach that? And I guess we can start with the Lawson's team, and then maybe have some insight here from Dane and Randy on this. But what's something that a brewery that's growing, that's starting to feel the stress and some of the pain, they're starting to grow a little bit, they want to expand, right? What's that first step that they can take to start exploring this? Like, how did you all do it?
The first step, I sort of feel like for us, a lot of it happened all at the same time. So it's hard to isolate, it doesn't always happen in the same order, right? Or exactly what the first sort of light bulb moment was. But looking back, it's definitely, we just had so many people trying to do the same thing, like all working towards the same goal, but we're all siloed in different spreadsheets and, databases. And it really was like just the lack of time, even with more people, because of all the, just manpower and time that takes to do all that manual data entry and analysis. And also to, get beer out the door in a timely fashion, I feel like is the first step, right? Like we can look at the numbers later, but it was trying to make sure we were getting beer to the people who needed it and wanted it in the time that we could, and produce it accordingly.
Right on. So maybe it come to Jesus a bit on the first step, right? Understand. Yeah.
A little bit.
I think from Vicinity's perspective, I think there are two main areas that we see breweries initially reaching out to us to challenges. The infrastructure is normally Excel. That's normally where formulas are kept, logs are created, etc. and any kind of history is relegated to spreadsheets. So the two areas that we're seeing people, breweries come to us about is about inventory control, kind of a real-time understanding of what raw materials they've got. Packaging is actually a big one, and making it all work from the hot side and the cold side, and being able to know what you've got available to sell. The second part is actually scheduling, because most people are doing scheduling, particularly the cellar. Being able to when the tanks start becoming the bottleneck, when the fermentation tanks become the bottleneck, that's where the challenge comes in my opinion. The brew house, normally we can, it's normally not the initial bottleneck until the cellar starts putting a lot of pressure on the brew house, and then they expand the brew house. But most people add fermentation tanks, and then that scheduling of those tanks becomes a real headache, with multiple people trying to change things and last minute changes and things like that. So those are the two main things that we see people come to us initially. And then there's a lot we can do beyond that, but those are the two I think that we hear pretty consistently.
Right. And from the ERP side, which Business Central is representing here, which is the supply chain and finance, it's really coming out of growth, right? You know, the formula management and recipes that Randy talked about really is the infancy of any brewery going forward. But, you know, when you're growing a company, especially given, as Alyssa talked about, the footprint of QuickBooks and a bunch of Excel spreadsheets as well, there's a lot of reliance on tacit knowledge really in those organizations, you know, legacy. And as you grow and you have somebody like Fiona and you want to do more things, it's very hard to replicate that complexities in there as well. And so having one system and one focus makes it a lot easier to grow that team. And that's just not the growth of the internal team. The operational growth is the other modifier, right? For an investment like this, you know, an organization or a brewery is really going to take on, well, yes, we can manage the brewing of stuff as well, and then we can manage our finances. But at the end of the day, now we're having omni-channel, as they call it, supply chain. It's not just sending to local liquor stores or regional liquor stores. It could be private labeling. It could be getting more regional. It could be sending through, you know, food, CP, you know, consumer packaged goods, if you're working with the larger, you know, vendors as well. And so that complexity, it really comes with that omni-channel supply chain is also a big modifier or catalyst for that ERP aspect, supply chain and finance side, right? So it's that growth from an organizational operational standpoint, and it's growth really from a supply chain standpoint. So you can manage omni-channel, even e-commerce sites, right? To be able to do that is a big facet of what we've seen. And I'm sure that's similar to what Lawson's seen to really motivate them to make that further investment into a holistic solution.
So we've grown, right, as a brewery, right? We have a need to evolve. We've recognized that. We've had our moment of, can we get everything out the door and still make time to improve, right? So work in the business while on the business. So we've done that, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here. So once you make that choice, and we'll go back to Fiona and Alyssa here. Once you've made that choice, then what helped you start rolling this out? Like, what strategies did you put in place, and how did that go?
Well, we did have 2 shifts. So like we said, we kind of jumped into our big system in 2018 for our brew system. And that's when we implemented Vicinity. I wasn't around. Like I said, I'm 2021. So Alyssa can talk a little bit more to that. And then, yeah, so you want to talk about the Vicinity jump, and then I'll talk about the BC jump?
Yeah, I mean, I think just piggybacking off of that a little bit, it's like, it's not doing everything all at once, right? Like there's these big investments into these systems, and getting on board with Vicinity to start was a huge leap for us, a necessary leap, but still big. So we didn't struggle with like buy-in necessarily, but you know, how do you get everyone on board when you know, time is limited and valuable, and there's beer to be made and sold. So it really did like come down to like just doing it in pieces, and investing in cross-training and the why, and like making sure everyone kind of was speaking the same language and having the same tools, and also kind of addressing some of our biggest pain points first, right? So there's still, even to this day, like little adjustments and improvements that we're making and reevaluating, you know, but it's kind of like doing it in pieces and being willing to kind of like go back and reevaluate and adjust where you have to.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Randy, I'll start with you on this one too. Kind of piggybacking off of that. What's the why? What's the strategy that from the system perspective that you've done again to kind of help with the rollout?
Well, first off, I think Alyssa was dead on. Is that crawl, walk, run? Don't try to get ahead of yourself, and identify and address those primary concerns that you've got up front. There's a lot that Vicinity can do to help, but the company, the brewery, is generally not ready to absorb all of it at the same time. So this is a kind of a long-term relationship. At Vicinity particularly, we're very conscious that people are generally pretty short-staffed, and they're having to run the business while they're implementing. So we try to pick the low-hanging fruit collectively together and say, these are the things that if we can solve these in X number of months, we will be in a position to become a different, better, bigger company. That's the kind of our mindset when we come into it, and trying to listen to the client and identify what are their particular pain points. Having done this for so long, we can kind of guess at what some of those are going to be, but it's really nice to have a collaborative effort. And what's nice about how Vicinity specifically is addressed is we can stand alone. So we can get you going with logs and things like that, and kind of roll it out as it starts to make more sense to have more into the system. So it's very, I really like the approach of a very tailored, directed approach with a focus on solving specific issues for the stockholders to get some wins up front, and then we can start building upon that as it makes sense for the business.
Now, Dane, would you echo that? Is there any additional strategy or complementing input that you'd have on that in terms of how to phase approach or how to make this addressable for a team that's, they're still doing their day job and then they have to do this on top?
Right. I mean, the whole theory, and again, I'm sure Randy will echo this is your system, not ours, right? We're there to support you, and obviously, the less support you require this, the more you've enhanced it and developed yourself. Right. So we probably use an overused term in the industry of minimum viable product, right? What's the MVP to get you to a point just so you can balance the investment you're going to have to make with a real return on that investment, right? When you're transforming something like Lawson's has done from QuickBooks and spreadsheets to an end-to-end, two system, pre-integrated solution set, not just the operational organizational impact of that, but the cost impact as well. So we try to do that from a minimum viable product, as Randy has said, is that which gets you the most acceleration with the least amount of risk. In finding that balance, it's not something that may take just one conversation, right? It's really the conversation approach that we take. And so, one of the greater advantages of Microsoft is that unlike other providers, you're not compelled to buy software right away when you engage with a company like ourselves. So what we do is we work with Randy and design your system first, have you verify what that design would be, and it's actually a complete future design. And then as a team, you say, I want 60% of that now, or 80% of that now, right? And it allows you as a team to really get not just a conceptual view of what this impact is going to be, but an actual view before any investments made past with software around that as well. And so that's really two ways we address that, because again, it's once you decide on the software, then it's about the solution, right? And the solution is what you guys can consume financially, operationally, organizationally, right? And then come back as you're ready to add other things. And again, both the Microsoft approach for licensing as well as Vicinity's approach, as Randy just pointed out, to really transform, kind of automate your business first, then transform. That's another language I see a lot with first, is that the first phase is really just automating. And then the add-on or enhancements are the transformation, where the system actually can create efficiencies and do things 3 times as fast because it's in one system. That's really the best way we probably communicate to our prospects and clients around that impact.
All right. That automation seems key to giving people a little bit more time as they have to continue to expand out with these types of systems. So makes sense, right? Find the time and use that time to get more efficient. So speaking of people, though, right? This is something that I feel like is getting overlooked less, but at least in the history of software implementations, wasn't necessarily forefront. But I think everyone agree that when we're dealing with people and we're dealing with the team, getting them on board, right? Getting them participating easing that learning curve is pretty much the most critical item with any system. Without the people using it, a system is nothing, right? So we have to do that. So this might be a big question, but I guess we'll start with the Lawson team again. When you're dealing with challenges of getting people on board, and even more so now that you've evolved through it, keeping them on board, how do you do that? How do you get people engaged? How do you communicate changes to them? How do you continue to iterate on the system and improve it, without causing frustration, or I should say without causing a reasonable amount of frustration, right, and getting everybody upset? What have you been doing from a strategy perspective that's been beneficial?
I think it's really important to just get in the input from the people who are using the system, because I am an accountant. I can design a system. I can design a process as I see fit, but I'm not in operations. I'm not the one that's like making the beer and putting it into the system, and I'm not entering the formulas and all the recipes in. So what I've found is super useful is to just get the input and have big old sessions where I get feedback from everybody and say, hey, what's your biggest pain point? Like kind of just what we were discussed on, like what is our biggest low hanging fruit that we can tackle that makes your life easier? And then from there, we kind of like work on it and really just start digging through and just influencing, or really just like driving home the point that like this is a change for good. Change is always difficult. It takes a while to learn, but it's always going to give you more time in the back end. It's going to let you go on vacation. It's going to let you be sick and not have to come into work. It's all of those kind of things that are going to be really beneficial for you in the future.
And it is one of the hardest sort of concepts to grapple with, right? Like, I think, in a perfect world, everyone would be on the same page and speaking the same language, but it's not the reality we live in. And we've had processes that we've sort of rolled with for long stretches of time that we've had to reevaluate because people change and the beer industry changes, and we all have to be, flexible and willing to adapt. So kind of just piggybacking on what Fiona said, it's like good communication is key and good cross-training is key, and kind of being willing to be thoughtful about our processes, and just as willing to go back and reassess and rewrite them too.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also important to recognize when you're creating a project team to do something like this, is to recognize the different things those people bring to the table, but also some of the challenges that they may have as well. Not everybody is built for some of the ambiguity at the beginning in piloting, going through various processes, trying things on. It's a little bit like trying on different hats and seeing what makes sense. There are a number of ways that we can address the specific issue in front of us, and we're trying to find the one that makes the most sense for the entire ecosystem of the company. And so not every personality is okay with that. That's in their comfort zone. Some people would rather just give their input, go away a little bit, and then have a solution that has already been worked through presented to them. And then they can give a little bit of feedback on that, but they've been heard, but they don't have to go through the trial of the various scenarios that you may want to investigate. So I think that's really important for people to realize, is that not everybody is the same. And that's not good, bad, whatever. It's just kind of the way they're cut. And it's really important to have a good project manager that can keep it all moving with a cross-functional team that's helping and support all that process of giving input, and in many cases being part of the testing, part of the training, et cetera, and then roll it out to the rest of the people that really aren't in that type of headspace to do that.
Right on. Well, it is the biggest challenge, I with any project, right? So I feel like we could spend another 45 minutes just on that topic, but
yep.
We'll come back and touch on it a little bit. But switching to another risk here, and something that we hear quite a lot of, right? I know it comes up with every system transition, especially when you've been kind of scrapping things together as best you can on spreadsheets and things like that. But it's about consistency and data, right? How do you get all the old data that you've been using in various different forms or formats or into the new system so that you can be productive really from day one? Like, what's that? How did that exercise go for y'all at Lawson's?
It took a lot of time, lot of time when we did our QuickBooks to Business Central transition. I highly recommend doing a full inventory count every single thing, every, bag of malt, every box of hops, get the full count and make sure that your data that you've got in your old system and your spreadsheets and your Weaver and QuickBooks, make sure that that's all accurate before you put it into this new system, because you're still learning the system. So if you've got to make edits, make changes, you're putting in inaccurate data, it's going to take us that much longer to fix. And just like do reconciliations, I reconciled almost every single balance sheet account. So that was like every asset that we had, just making sure that it was all, down to the T. And of course, that just takes up a lot of time. But all of the time that you put in before you do that switch is really going to save you like a plethora and tenfold time afterwards, because it's just harder to try and figure out your fix in a new system where you're not as expert in it as you were in the old system. You'll get there. Like 5 years later, I'm able to make those fixes that I messed up when I did my integration a lot easier, but it would be really great if I didn't have to do them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there will be, you will run into problems, right? And I think when I look back on it too, it's just like knowing your data is so important, right? Because when you're in a new system, an unfamiliar territory, so to speak, I think it's, that's how you're going to kind of see if like things are looking right or not in the right spot. So sort of being really familiar with what you got going in.
Fair enough. Yeah, it sounds I will say it sounds like a lot of work, and from what y'all are saying, it is. And with a lot of work, I think comes inherent risk, right? So when we talk about having to do all these different elements, having to be very diligent, reviewing things like data and communicating with the team and spending that extra effort across the board, how did you eliminate as much of that risk as possible, understanding that any change is going to have some inherent risk? But were there strategies that y'all did, or were there things that you found particularly effective to limit some of that?
Like I said, like I created reconciliation, so I knew, and like Alyssa said, we knew our data going in. So it's just like everything that you're popping in, just check what it was before in your old system, check what it is in the new system. I do have to like give a great plug for Whipley. Our integrations team had so many great templates that they were able to kind of just give us, and we gave them the data. They were able to plug and play and added it into our new Business Central system from QuickBooks. And I was able to go in, double check it. I had both systems up, on the two screens, comparing it, just making sure that everything was, the same and accurate.
Yeah, I think that we do a variety, like we've kind of over the years done quite a bit of like running two things at the same time, right? So it's like, even right now I'm working on a project I'm trying to do solely out of Business Central that's in Excel, and I'm running it for a couple months while I make sure that I've got my data working the way I want it to. And then the payoff, of course, is once I can kind of stop doing both of those, I'm going to have so much extra time.
Fair. To find a new project, I'm sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's
right. And we'll start it over again. It's very cyclical.
I think one of the things to keep in mind, particularly related to data, is make sure that you're spending time on the data that makes sense moving forward. In other words, there are a lot of times when people come to us wanting us to bring their old logs in from Excel, as an example, and have them in the system. I'm not sure that provides as much value as people might give it credit for at the beginning. It's probably the one data asset that loses value every single day. The further away you get from that data, the less valuable it is. You're creating new data that's more valuable. So if I had only an hour to work on, I'd be working on something new versus necessarily trying to bring in a bunch of transactional data. There are some exceptions to that, of course, but as a general rule, let's not spend a huge amount of time on our side getting brew logs and fermentation logs and et cetera from 2 years ago into the system.
Dane, would you add anything to that in terms of either data control or reducing risk overall?
No, it's pretty specific to what Randy has said as well. I mean, data risk in general is always out there. I mean, a lot of these systems, every ERP system is relying on data. It's the biggest risk after the project. It's the biggest risk going into a project, right? He's cleaning that data and working through data as well. But that data governance in the long run, a lot of clients are focused on that now. I think with the advent of analytics and everything going together, where much of the last 10 or 15 years was really around ERP and business applications, which we agree is still a big part of the drive to things as well. I think if you would ask most clients that are evaluating ERP systems today, especially in the brewery industry, it's about the data. They have the data in one place. Is the data real? And whether that resonates in a green color on the screen or a blue color on the screen, right? It's all super, super important. It's often even more important than your processes and your usability to do that. We're just finding our clients are focused a lot more on that because that's where, again, that's almost the IP of the organization in a lot of ways is in the data. So I would agree.
Well, I think we've had a bit of a journey already in this first 30 minutes, right? We kind of talked about the growth and what happened from that. We talked about the identification of the need for new processes and systems and kind of how we approach that, and some of the challenges to overcome and think about as we've done that. So maybe we go to the good part. Maybe we start talking about results a little bit and some of the outputs and what all the effort is able to produce. I should take a quick moment and pause for anyone in the audience. We will take live questions and comments. So feel free to go ahead and put those in chat. We will come circle back on that. I just wanted to get that little plug out there. And now switching gears to results. So we talked about a few different things. We talked about the growth. We talked about some of the complexity and inventory and planning and some of the specifics around reporting requirements and data and things like that. But when we start talking about kind of the new world, right? So you sucked it up and put in the time and did the extra effort to plan the data, to get the team on board, to implement the system. Now, as a result of that, you have this new system with a tremendous amount of data. A lot of that data is around compliance, right? So how has the new world changed, right? What automations are in place now? How has this improved for your reporting? And how has that made the processes easier and more reliable?
I'm our compliance guru, I guess, so I'll speak to this one. I mean, Fiona and I were talking about this earlier. I can't imagine doing our compliance without these systems, right? I mean, there's just so much to gather. And, we were able to work with Vicinity and Whipfly to make sure stuff's matching appropriately, like for our TTB that we, and we have to do it, right? Like, I'd love to say it doesn't matter, but we all have to do compliance. We all have to do it by a certain date. And the more time you're able to focus on actually like what your data is telling you versus like how it's being put into the system and having to manually adjust it, like the better your process is going to be. So, I mean, I couldn't even tell you off the top of my head, but like a dozen different like compliance related actions that I use these systems for, that have to be done every month or every quarter. And it's really nice to be able to like trust that the system is putting out what I expect it to. And again, like kind of knowing your data, coming back to that piece, you're going to be able to focus a lot more on how it's looking versus spending time putting it in.
I think from Vicinity's perspective, particularly focusing on TTB for a second, one of the big challenges that we saw that was surprising to us was that how different breweries will report the same data differently. You've got all the boxes, the columns, and the rows, And we thought going in, we just write this and we hard code all these transactions into these boxes and boom, we're done. It's not that at all. Every brewery is different. Every one of you decide to put in box the row 13, second column, something different than the other guy. And you wouldn't think that to be the case, but it is the case. And so we went back and redesigned our application really to be really customer centric, and that is every cell can be configured, like what transactions go in here, what filters are necessary, et cetera. And so it's this part of it is very much like a fingerprint. Every brewery is different, and your software needs to be able to support that. It's been great for us because it really allows us to dig deeper in with the client to identify the transactions. And what Alyssa was saying is once you start seeing your data, you can recognize it and say, this doesn't look right. And then be able to drill into that and say, oh, okay, this one was classified this way. I just need to make this change. It'll fall into place. And that's the reality of it. Every project, every TTV project we do is like that. And it just, you have to get in with the users and identify what transactions need to go into which boxes. We have a general idea which ones most people use, but it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's between the brewery and their auditor that, to make the decision as to whether it's okay or not.
Yeah, having that at your fingertips, being able to produce it on monthly seems to be a huge time saver at a minimum. But obviously the accuracy is probably the most thing that's most important out of all of that. And I can tell you with some of the smaller groups that we work with on that are doing this without the automation, that is a constant struggle. So it's nice to hear that it's a smooth sailing for y'all. But in terms of, so going kind of to our next step here, that when we're talking about, so we have the compliance, right? We have the transactions there, we're tracking that. But let's talk about efficient purchasing, right? And controlling inventory on that, right? So much of the cash of the business is tied up with what you have on the shelves. How do we keep that to a minimum while still ensuring that we're not, missing what we need for key orders or deadlines, right? How's that been affected?
It's obviously streamlined it all so much. Previously, we had our CFO actually getting every single invoice, emailing it to all of our approvers, waiting on them to approve it, then putting all of the receipts or whatnot into QuickBooks or whatever it was. It was just taking forever for someone who really should be focusing their time on a much higher level. And it also it cost us money, honestly, doing it that way in such a slow and arduous and manual process, because, we've got those people that get 50 emails a day. A director might get a bunch of emails, and, an approval on a single invoice might get lost. When that happens, we get hit with a late fee. So now we're all right, great. We're paying a late fee or an interest charge on these invoices. And it's just kind of really, really slow and arduous, and just are able to spend so much more time on making better decisions now, where we can see, all right, we've got this purchase, we've got the inventory, we see exactly how much it costs. Is it better to buy it in bulk? How often do we use it? Maybe we can cut it. Can we replace it with this is now outside my area of expertise on recipe building, but can we replace it with a different, more cost effective, or one that can span across different, beers and brews? Really just seeing that overall data and having it faster and quicker into a system that everyone has access to, not just, the CFO or, finance team. I'm not the one making the decisions on the brews. So being able to give that to our brewing director and stuff is a lot better for our business.
And I would add something to this also, to be proactive with your suppliers, packaging, hop farms, et cetera. And that is, if you would just simply take your flagships, your year-round beers that you do, and get that into a forecast. And in our case, MRP will go through that and determine what your gross requirements are going to be by time period, whether that be month, quarter, whatever. And it gives you a pretty good view, without doing much work, of what your requirements are going to be. So next year, our 2-row is going to be this, or our various hop varietals will be X. And be able to work with the suppliers and say, this is what we're looking at. And being able to provide them that type of information, you become a customer that brings them information rather than them having to seek it out and try to figure it out themselves. That ultimately will help drive down some pricing. Maybe if you get caught, you're having continuing dialogue, they can get a delivery to you quicker than maybe you originally thought, things like that. Becoming a good customer for your suppliers is really key, and it doesn't take much to do it. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go down to your one-offs and all of that. I would just say 80% of your volume is going to be done by a handful of beers. Get that under control, and then hand that to Business Central to do purchasing and track your hop contracts and various contracts you got with bottles and cans and things like that. That will, without doing a lot of work, you can move the needle a long way. And that's what we're after. That's low-hanging fruit right there. And it's easy to implement, and the information shares back and forth, and it starts to learn from itself. So that's kind of my take on it. It's maybe not something people initially look at, but it's an easy thing to implement.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
All right. Well, kind of continue on that, and you mentioned. Well, you mentioned kind of the having everything in one place, right? Having the formulas, having quality, having purchasing data, having all of that data in there to make strategic decisions quicker, right? And as a result, being more competitive. And I think, we're under no illusion here, right? The industry as a whole, it's a tough time, right? There's a lot of uncertainty in the market as a whole, and also in the brewing industry. And everybody's trying to do more with less, right? You want more output, more variety, less overhead to get that. But what are some of the other ways beyond just the, being more overall efficient, or maybe more specifically some points of efficiency that has helped making you more competitive, right? It helps keep you kind of top of your game and leading the charge in the industry.
I mean, I think my biggest high level takeaway is we've really shifted as a company from, just looking at the thing in front of us to, exactly kind of Randy's point. We're looking forward, right? We're being really proactive instead of reactive to the industry and to what's going on and to our sales and our demand. And it's really given us that opportunity to get all our data in one place and plan ahead versus just running around like crazy.
Yeah. And we're able to just pivot faster too. You're constantly getting data from, brewers associations coming out with these reports, and you're getting your other things from Ollie, Toast, Arrived, whichever POS you're using to see what's selling well, what's not selling, what can we push, what's got a better margin, all of these data. We're able to get all of that and pivot our business plan faster and quicker and be more effective with it. And again, just diving into what Randy and Alyssa are saying, and not wasting. We're not wasting our time. We're not wasting our beer. We're not leaving it sitting on the shelves for it to get dusty. We're getting it into the hands of our fans.
I think also from a business owner's perspective, trying to look at what the next generation looks like, what the next chapter looks like next year and the following year. What we're seeing is a lot of mergers, a lot of acquisitions. And so if you've got a system in place where you can bring on other breweries, or in Lawson's case, contract brewing for others that otherwise it doesn't make sense for them to run their own brewery, but Lawson does that, and they do, the marketing is on the company that's having the contract done for them. It allows for more growth, and I think that's where we're going to see a lot of growth in certain companies, is through acquisitions or in contract brewing. And that growth that's hockey stick growth. That's really quick. because you're taking on an entire volume of either another brewery, or maybe you're offloading some of, giving them more capacity by contract brewing, and being able to be dynamic enough to bring on a formula, to bring on a new beer without having to reinvent a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, et cetera, just to do that. It just slides in as another formula, and then different items, a wort, bright, packaged beer, et cetera. It's rather easy to add another incremental beer. So I think as we go into 2026, 2027, I think we're going to see more and more of that going on. And those companies that have gotten out of Excel and into a system similar to the Vicinity Brew, I think are in a strategic advantage to be able to do that, allowing their equipment to do the work, and the systems are already in place to keep accounting for it.
Now, this wouldn't be a tech presentation if I didn't drop a random AI thing into it. But Dane, when we speak about competitiveness and efficiency, right, I know that there's a number of different tools that are coming out. I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there anything really exciting from a efficiency standpoint? I know Microsoft's invested heavily. Yep. What's coming out that's something that can help this further? Right?
Yeah, and a lot of it is collaboration. A lot of this AI tools, again, we kind of joke when we show them AI tools, like, you can do this in your current system, it's going to take you longer. You can go find that information and do it. So a lot of AI does is bring information to you. What we're finding in some of the next advancements, at least on the Business Central side, and Copilot's included for free, just to let you know, with Business Central, is really around what we call agents. So there's a payables agent and an order agent. And what that does, it hooks up into, say, your orders at lawsonsfinest.com and AP at finest.com. And it works in such a way that it looks at those inboxes, prioritizes the email and suggests messages back to them, but puts it inside Business Central. So if you're opening your Business Central Insight, you can actually see the agent on the right-hand panel of those inboxes. If, say, you're the AP person or the salesperson as well. We'll prioritize those emails and then start scripting suggested responses to those emails to allow you to execute on them as well. So it's really tying in those responsiveness to both people you owe money to from a vendor perspective and your customers as well. So that's the next stage. It's called an agent, a payables agent and an order agent. So that's just coming out with Business Central. And again, hooking it into those inboxes kind of gives you that experience where AI is going to help you to respond to your customers, and it will look at the size of the order in the email, the client's experience. So it doesn't just look at the email and try to develop context based on it will look at that history of that client, and it'll say, oh, that client is our biggest person. Let's put that at the top of your list and suggest, hey, we're going to do our best to get your order in done. You can then obviously tailor that messaging. But just think about that. I mean, I think the biggest thing you're going to see in AI, especially for high transactional jobs like AP orders, right? That's really you're going to sign the volume. People that are analyzing and planning, that still takes some personal effect. But I think the next stage you're seeing, AI's first stage was get the information and give it and summarize it to you quickly. That was kind of like stage one. Stage two is now automating that experience outside the organization with orders and payables, just so you guys can work quicker and even smarter as well. So it's all about gaining efficiency. The last thing I say, the whole joke is when we present that to clients, we go through that Copilot and all that stuff. We ask the clients and say, this should be exciting to you, right? It's kind of, I call it the baby shower. This is the diaper cake. You should be like, oh my gosh, I can go home at 3 now or 2 o'clock because all the stuff I'm doing is now working quicker because of that automation. So those are the two biggest things, Anthony, that are coming with Copilot, are those agent capabilities.
We'll have more time to do more projects, and we'll all commute on our hover cars. So sounds great. So one last question here, and then we'll try to open it up for one final one if we have enough time here. But kind of summarizing all of this, right? And this is really directed to Lawson's team. But having gone through all of this, having been going on this journey for a number of years, at the point where you are now, what's the biggest gain that you've seen? It could be time, it could be operations, it could be, again, compliance and all that thing. But what's your gain that you're seeing at this moment from this entire effort?
I think it's just time, because, if you take a step back and look at everything as a whole, your process, your improvements, your compliance, that all takes your own time. And if you're able to do that faster and more efficient, like Alyssa, like we've we've gotten reports now instead of manually tracking every brew and every shipment that we've got for our compliance reporting. If we've got that, we have time now to just do it faster, do it quicker, and get on with our day and move on to the next project, to make more improvements, to really focus on what the business needs, and what the people of the business needs. And, if you are a small business, a small brewery, and you've only got a couple of people, you're a brewer, but you're also admin. You don't want to be sat doing compliance stuff. You want to be out on your floor and you want to be brewing. You want to be doing what you enjoy. And, it's so weird to say, but like ERPs give you the time to have fun. Like I enjoy spreadsheets, but I enjoy the spreadsheet when I don't have to do as much work in it. So yeah, it's just, it all comes down to really increasing the time and putting more effort and energy into places that are more beneficial for your business.
I just have to note for the recording that that's probably the first time anybody's put fun and ERP in the same.
I like to be unique. What can I
You
say?
say it all the time.
Yeah.
I saved that soundbite.
Well, you don't talk about many accountants.
I totally second that. And I mean, yes, and it's time and it's how you're using it, right? I mean, we've gone through so many of these different stages of the business, like where we were just kind of like running, trying to keep everything, responding to what we needed to respond to. And the noticeable shift that I've seen, and I've been with this company now for 8 years, and the noticeable shift that I've been able to observe is like, we're all focusing on like meatier stuff, for lack of a better way to put it. Like we're getting to do analysis of like what our more profitable SKUs are. We're getting to plan further ahead. We're responding to the current climate and the industry shifts. Like it just feels like we're running the business better. And it totally comes down to how we're using our time and the processes we've been able to put in play.
Well, let's go ahead and close out, I guess, our conversation here before opening up to a couple of questions here. As we do that, I do want to say thank you to Craft Beer Professionals for hosting this virtual conference. Also, a special thanks to Danielle Parks on the Vicinity team for helping us put together this panel and presentation. I really appreciate all the help there. And thank you, of course, to all the panel members from Lawson's, from Vicinity, from Whipfleet for participating in it. All the insight was very valuable, and I'm sure we're going to have some follow-ups as a result of this. Now, going to questions. So the first thing I have here is, again, kind of going for the Lawson's team, but Randy and Dane, please do chime in if appropriate. But what was the biggest surprise that you encountered when you were first starting this project in terms of a challenge? What was the thing that you didn't think about that kind of blindsided you a little bit, or was there a moment that you had to kind of scramble?
Fiona, anything come up with the BC integration? I know that was a big lift.
Yeah. I can't think of like a very specific thing, but I really like to kind of attribute, it's a very terrible analogy, but like I compare like project management and implementations to like roadwork construction. You're really making that improvement. You're going to make it so much better for everybody going forward. But it's always going to take a lot longer than you thought it would. So for me, I had a great deadline goal of, I think it was like Q3 or mid-year. I think it was July, that I wanted to be live in the system. And we just hit, a couple of road bumps, pun intended. And, we had to push our deadline back, and it was kind of actually baked into my own plan. So we went live in December instead of July. But my absolute last minute goal was, the new year. I was like, absolutely no way am I going past that. But, I'm from New York City. If anyone is from the New York or the tri-state area, I used to drive on the BQE every day. BQE was supposed to be completed in the 80s. It is still under construction. So all of your projects go a lot faster than that. But always kind of build in like a little bit of buffer zone to really if you don't hit your expectation of your go live date, just make sure all your data and all your training and everyone is good in your system to kind of have a secondary backup for yourself.
Now, maybe Dane or Randy, do you see anything from the implementer side? Right, it's kind of similar to that question. So rephrasing this a little bit, but just, what's a constant item that's overlooked from your perspective that if you could tell those who are going to adopt a new system in the next year or two, right, to be on the lookout for, what would you say?
I believe it's management of the team and management of the schedule. You've got, I can only speak for Vicinity, but you're bringing in a team that does this all the time. We understand your industry, but we don't understand your company, and we don't understand the inner workings, what's said over the water cooler. So I think management of that and management of the project and management of people's expectations on the project team. Most people haven't gone through a big implementation like this. And so it's I'm not even going to say change management as much as it's just personality management, and make sure everybody keeps a sense of humor through it, and you will get through it, and it will be much better. Today's pain is tomorrow's gain. And so that's just kind of the way it is. And our job is to try to minimize that as much as possible and make that gain as big as practical within whatever you're choosing to do, whatever issue you're trying to address in phase one. That's so keep an eye on the team, make sure they're able to handle it, and rely on your vendor where appropriate. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah. And just follow up on Randy, the segue there is really the change. I mean, it's going to be a change for everybody. People start the project going, yeah, I'll be fine with that. Like, that's okay. I'll go in a new system. Everything will be great. Right. And really keeping an eye on that. We actually offer a complimentary change readiness survey that you can send out anonymously to your team members, which you can tailor with our organizational development team. Right. Like, how's this going to impact your job? Does your manager support this change? Are you worried about that impact? And what that does is that's before we get engaged with clients, it sees opportunities, threats and opportunities. Right. For example, hey, we're not going to do the manufacturing group. They're not ready. Or, hey, let's do this group. Let's pilot with this group because they're eager to go. Right. And so even keeping an eye on that and noticing that, again, at the end of the day, it's about the people that are driving the business. This is just simply an enhanced tool to do so. To lose sight of that can really be reckless if that happens. Yep.
Very fair. Well, kind of going back to the theme of phasing it out appropriately after communicating with the team, to ensure that transition can go as smoothly as possible. All right. Well, we're coming up here against our time. We did have one more question, maybe in the next 2 minutes. Alyssa and Fiona, you can weigh in on this, but knowing where you are now and where you came from, would you do it again?
Yes.
Absolutely. What? I don't really want to be on Twitter anymore.
I know. No pressure on that one. But
files and paperwork's taking up all my office space. Now I have room in my office again. Great.
That's right.
Everything is on the cloud.
We love the cloud.
Fair enough. Right on. Well, we'll go ahead and close everything out here, but thank you all again for attending. Thanks to our panel again for the wonderful insight, and thank you again to Craft Beer Professionals for putting on our virtual conference here. So cheers, y'all.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Good job.
Take care.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this session, we'd love to see you in real life. We host in-person workshops across the country for craft beer professionals just like you that are held in some of the most exciting beer destinations around. These immersive events are designed to help you grow and connect with others. You'll meet peers from across the country and leave with actionable strategies for success. Connection has never been more important, and you can learn more at cbpconnects.com. Cheers. See you there.